Everyone says they want peace. Peace in relationships, peace in conversation, peace in society, peace in their environment. But if you watch closely, most people don't actually want peace. They want control. Because real peace requires something most people struggle with: tolerance, disagreement, uncertainty, letting other people think differently without trying to correct them. Control is easier. Control says, if everyone would just think like me, if everyone would just act like me, if everyone would just agree with me, everything would be fine. But that's not peace. That's compliance. And compliance has never been the same thing as harmony. This is Without Permission, unfiltered conversations about power, identity, masculinity, culture, sexuality, and the things we were told not to say out loud. I'm Chris Willingham, and we're going to talk about why most people don't actually want peace. They want control. Let's define peace correctly. Peace is not the absence of disagreement. Peace is the ability to exist within disagreement without collapse. That's important because most people believe peace means no conflict, no tension, no opposing views. But that's not peace. That's silence. And silence is often created by pressure, not understanding. Real peace allows difference. Control eliminates it. Control feels like peace because it removes unpredictability. If everyone agrees with you, you don't have to think as hard. You don't have to defend your ideas. You don't have to regulate your emotions. Everything feels smooth, easy, predictable. But that smoothness is artificial because it depends on everyone else behaving a certain way. And the moment someone doesn't, peace disappears. Because it was never peace, it was control. Control is rooted in discomfort. When people feel uncertain, they try to reduce that uncertainty. When people feel challenged, they try to eliminate that challenge. When people feel unstable, they try to stabilize the environment. Instead of stabilizing themselves, that's the key difference. Stable people regulate internally. Unstable people regulate externally. They try to shape the room instead of strengthening themselves. You see this most clearly in conversations. Someone hears an idea they don't like, and instead of gauging with it, they try to shut it down. That shouldn't be said. That's not appropriate. You can't say that here. That's not about peace. That's about control. Because control removes the need to engage. It removes the need to think. It removes the need to tolerate discomfort. And this shows up heavily in relationships. One partner wants peace, but what they actually want is no disagreement, no challenge, no pushback, just agreement. But that's not a healthy relationship. That's a controlled environment. Because real relationships require space. Space for difference, space for disagreement, space for growth. Without that space, connection becomes conditional. Let's talk about men because control shows up here too. Some men confuse control with strength. They think, if I control the situation, I'm strong. If I can control the conversation, I'm dominant. If I control the environment, I'm leading. But control is not strength. Control is often insecurity trying to create stability. Real strength doesn't need to control everything. It can sit in uncertainty. It can tolerate disagreement. It can allow other perspectives to exist without collapsing. This also shows up differently in women, not as physical control, but as emotional control, trying to shape conversations, trying to manage reactions, trying to influence outcomes through emotion. Again, not because of weakness, because of discomfort. Because uncertainty feels unsafe and control feels stabilizing. Social media amplified this because now people can control what they see, who they hear, what perspectives enter their world, block, mute, unfollow, filter. And while that can create comfort, it also creates distortion because reality becomes curated, not complete. Control has a cost. It limits growth, it limits perspective, it limits understanding, because growth requires exposure to things you don't control. And when people avoid that exposure, they become more rigid, more reactive, less adaptable. So let's take a minute and bring this back to you. Think about the last time something bothered you. Did you try to understand it, or did you try to eliminate it? That answer tells you everything. Control rarely presents itself as control. It disguises itself as morality, as concern, as protection, as doing the right thing. You hear it in language like, that's not okay to say. You shouldn't think like that. That kind of opinion is harmful. I'm just trying to protect people. Those statements sound ethical. They sound responsible. But underneath them is often a desire to regulate the environment, to remove discomfort, to eliminate opposing perspectives, not through conversation, through restriction. And when control is disguised as morality, it becomes harder to challenge because now disagreement looks like wrongdoing. Now step back. This isn't just individual behavior, it's cultural. Different groups want different versions of peace. Some want peace through structure, some want peace through freedom, some want peace through agreement, some want peace through expression. And when those definitions collide, tension increases because each group believes their vision of peace is correct. But often, what they're actually defending is control. Control over language, control over behavior, control over norms. So let's talk about something sensitive. Safe spaces. At their best, safe spaces provide support. They allow people to feel heard, understood, respected. But at their worst, they become controlled environments, places where certain ideas are not allowed, where disagreement is discouraged, where challenge is interpreted as harm. And when that happens, people don't grow. They stabilize temporarily, but they don't expand. Because growth requires exposure, not insulation. There's a difference between control and leadership. Control forces outcome, leadership influences them. Control says this is how it will be. Leadership says here's the direction, let's move together. Control relies on pressure, leadership relies on presence. Control needs compliance, leadership earns trust. And many people confuse the two because control feels immediate. Leadership takes discipline. Control is not just behavioral, it's emotional. People become addicted to it because control reduces anxiety. It reduces uncertainty. It creates a sense of order. But that order is fragile because it depends on external conditions. People behaving a certain way, situations unfolding predictably, conversations staying within boundaries. And when those conditions break, anxiety returns, stronger, because it never resolved internally. It was managed externally. Let's come back to men for a minute, because this is where growth happens. Strong men don't need to control everything. They can sit in uncertainty. They can hear disagreement. They can allow other perspectives without feeling threatened. Because their stability is internal, not dependent on the room, not dependent on agreement, not dependent on compliance. That's real strength. For women, control often shows up through emotional influence, shaping conversations, guiding reactions, managing outcomes through tone and response. Again, not from weakness, from a desire of stability, from a desire of connection. But when emotional influence becomes control, it limits authenticity because people start responding to emotion instead of truth. In relationships, control destroys connection because control replaces curiosity. Instead of asking, why do you think that? It becomes, you shouldn't think that. And when that shift happens, people stop opening up. They start editing themselves. They become cautious, guarded, less honest. That's not peace. That's restriction. Let's come back to you again. Where in your life do you try to control outcomes? Conversations, people, perceptions, and more importantly, why? Is it clarity or is it discomfort? Because the answer determines whether you're leading or controlling. Real peace is not fragile. It doesn't collapse when challenged. It doesn't disappear when someone disagrees. It doesn't require everyone to align. Real peace is stable. It can exist in tension. It can exist in difference. It can exist in uncertainty because it comes from within, not from control. Let's say it clearly. A lot of what people call peace is actually control. It's the need for everyone around them to think a certain way, act a certain way, respond a certain way, so they don't have to feel discomfort. That's not peace, that's dependency. Dependency on the environment to stay stable instead of building stability within yourself. Control works until it doesn't. You can control a conversation for a moment. You can control a room temporarily. You can control people through pressure. But you cannot control reality. And reality always introduces something you didn't plan for, a different opinion, a different reaction, a different outcome. And when that happens, people who rely on control collapse because they never built internal stability. Now here's the part people struggle with. Letting go of control does not mean losing power. It means shifting where your power comes from. Instead of controlling the environment, you control yourself, your reactions, your emotions, your presence, your response to uncertainty. That's real power, because it doesn't depend on anyone else. Real peace is not quiet. Real peace is not agreement. Real peace is not the absence of tension. Real peace is the ability to stay grounded when tension exists, to hear something you don't like and remain composed, to sit in disagreement without needing to correct it immediately, to allow difference without feeling threatened. That's peace, and it's rare. Not controlling everything requires discipline, because your instincts will tell you, fix this, correct this, shut this down, make this stop. But discipline says, stay here, listen, understand, respond, don't react. That's not weakness, that's mastery. When you stop trying to control everything, your relationships change. People relax around you, they open up more, they speak more honestly, because they don't feel managed, they feel understood. And that creates something deeper than agreement. It creates trust. If more people learn this, culture would change. Conversations would improve, tension would decrease, not because everyone agrees, because people can handle disagreement. Because people wouldn't need control to feel stable. Now ask yourself this. Where in your life are you calling something peace that is actually control? A relationship, a conversation, an environment. And what would happen if you stopped trying to control it? Not recklessly, not emotionally, calmly, deliberately, with awareness. This comes down to a choice. You can control everything around you and stay dependent on that control, or you can strengthen yourself and become independent of it. One is easier, one is stronger. Most people say they want peace, but what they actually want is control, because control feels safer, predictable, manageable. But real peace doesn't come from control. It comes from stability. The kind of stability that allows you to exist in a world where not everything goes your way, where not everyone agrees with you, where not everything feels comfortable, and still remain grounded, still remain composed, still remain steady.